Day 613 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on just above 299,000 military personnel losses, accounting for an additional 660 in the past 24 hours. Then as for hardware losses, 8 tanks, 9 APVs, and an underwhelmingly unwhopping 8 artillery. Although some video comments have suggested or requested that I show the previous day that I wasn't in for. So here it is, a double-digit day all round for tanks, APVs, and artillery just yesterday. Then we'll head across to the map today and we'll start out in Russia, as there was a big explosion at the Afipsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai. And given its close proximity to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, it's likely to have been from Ukrainian actions, but no official word on that yet. Then we'll head across to the Donbass's north in Ukraine, as starting out, well, I'll zoom in for this one, but we can see that Russian lines were pushed back in the last day. As, well, more specifically, Ukrainian forces liberated the region between Nadia and Surivka. So there's been a bit of back and forth between both sides, right in this northern region, over the past 6 weeks in particular. And of course, the northern Donbass is not what Russia would have hoped for this far into the war, with Ukrainian defenses being what they are. But truly, it's an uphill battle for Russia all the way in the north here when you look closely at the topographical map. Not to mention that it's anti-tank mined up to the wazoo, compounded by the fact that many Russian personnel stationed in this northern region are actually funneled out or extracted to higher activity areas like that of Avdiivka or the Zaporizhia fronts. All of which inevitably leads to a lot of Russian offensive stagnation up here so far. Then, speaking of which, we'll move down to Avdiivka today, as there were Russian advance attempts west of the northern flank, as largely indicated by the arrows here, where Russian forces tried to breach Ukrainian lines once again, but when Ukrainian artillery opened fire, chaos erupted and the crews and infantry abandoned their vehicles in droves. And the count of hardware losses, Russian hardware losses, in this region just continues to go up in the last number of hours, but we're at least looking in the vicinity of 10 to 20, be they tanks or infantry fighting vehicles. And from that attempt, there's no doubt that Ukrainian FPV crews will likely make sure that those abandoned vehicles will not be reused by the Russian invaders. And for something interesting I'll mention in this region, as I made a meme for this channel about 10 months ago, because if you remember the Russian losses in Vuhledar from the start of the year, where there was just wave after wave of destroyed Russian mechanized brigades, just constantly and erroneously and unpreparedly driving into a minefield, literally. And that embarrassing event for Russia just went on for a solid month. Well, the Institute for the Study of War now states that Russian Avdiivka losses are much higher than the Vuhledar losses now. And I am just beside myself with that information, putting it in context like that. Because I never thought that Russia would not learn from such a massive mistake like that. I would have indeed expected that it was far too big a mistake to be hidden within the collective Russian military intelligence apparatus. But hey, in the end, Russia is a concealer of information, even unto themselves. And if you can't take a sober assessment of your losses, then you're never going to learn from that, and by extension, just not change your tactics on the battlefield. Then we'll head across to the central southern map today, as a Russian telegrammer was complaining about Ukrainians attacking them near Verbova, with the telegrammer stating essentially that Ukraine has superior artillery firepower, as opposed to the Russians in this area, or in contrast to. And also that Ukraine has a lot of artillery pieces in this very location. So just wow, how the war has changed, as this was the initial and ongoing gripe for some time by the Ukrainian forces instead, back at the beginning of the war. The times they are a-changin'. Oh, and then just nearby in Robotina, a brief mention on Ukraine taking out another Russian T-90M variant, so the latest and greatest, so to speak, of what Russia has to offer, the main battle tank. In this instance, it was reported that the explosion completely disintegrated the tank. Then we'll head across to Kherson for a moment, as ongoing Ukrainian shaping offensive operations in the region continue to outplay, as the AFU seeks to install a larger permanent foothold in the South Bank. Then once again, Russian forces also stated the annoyance that this is creating for them. And they even stated about the sophisticated methods that the AFU has been employing, such as hiding their attack with artillery raids on any part of Russian positions, and then rushing into southern positions on the south bank of the Dnipro for areas that Ukraine already somewhat partially controls, and also that the AFU has been using bad weather to make some moves there as well. But in terms of actual updates, very hard to see on this map, if at all really. But it is said that part of the village of Krinky had new liberated gains added to it there, and that right now the bridgehead is also being expanded. Then we'll head down south to Russian-occupied Crimea, as the Russian Ministry of Defense claims the shooting down of 36 drones over the Black Sea and the northwestern part of occupied Crimea. But this is not a lot of information to go on, really. So either the Russian MOD is accurately stating what happened there, which means 36 is a lot of Ukrainian drones to fire into Crimea in such a short space of time, or Russia is not telling the truth, or the Russian MOD, thus covering up some sort of their own internal failures in the process. Which actually leads me all the way down to Feodosia, as it seems a Ukrainian drone made it all the way to this location in the southeast of the peninsula, hitting something of value as explosions and fire was reported, and it's entirely plausible that these two events relate. As, for instance, Ukraine would seek to overwhelm Russian air defenses, as they send some of those drones to key strategic military targets in the south as well. Then we'll head across to some news for today. We'll start out with some hardware news. So Denmark will send its 13th military aid package to Ukraine in the amount of $520 million worth. The package includes tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, ammunition, drones, and small arms. Now, as for the tanks, 30 Leopard 1s, an older tank, but at least they passed the balance in beer test, and have been well maintained and modernized as well, plus 15 T-72 tanks, also well maintained tanks in this instance. So 45 tanks in total just from one aid package from a smaller European country. It's impressive. And I haven't even mentioned the total of 50 BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles in the very same package as well, which will be a significant boost to Ukraine's ground forces, as they will provide much needed firepower and protection for Ukrainian infantry. Outstanding, Denmark. Then in some more hardware news, the first batches of Germany's winter package has arrived in Ukraine. So this includes another IRST air defense system, as well as another radar system. The package also includes munitions for the Mars 2 MLRS systems. Then also 8 vector surveillance drones, 4 ground radars, 4 APCs of undisclosed types, more IRST missiles, numerous border patrol vehicles, and 155mm artillery munitions, and among other things as well. Then, as for a bit of a Russian hardware update, and Russia was really making me work very hard for this one today, because I did search far and wide, and did find a number of two-dimensional MiG-31 jets that Russia added to their arsenal recently. That is to say, they started painting groundworks attempting to represent 4 fake MiG-31s at the Belbek airfield in Sevastopol. So, analysts have very obviously pointed out that the Russian military is attempting to deceive monitoring systems. Although they also point out that modern surveillance technology can differentiate between two-dimensional and three-dimensional objects. I don't know, it's almost as if Russia has not spent the last 80 years since World War II in updating so many elements of their military strategic playbooks. So instead opting to keep to tradition. Then in some other news, this one is some economy news. So Russia has once again increased its central bank interest rate, this time to 15%. Previously it was at 13% about a month ago. Then going back to June/July, it was set at 7.5%. So it's literally double in such a short space of time. And Russia needs to do this to curb its internal inflationary pressures. Although raising interest rates so high certainly has its drawbacks or negative consequences. For example, it can make it more difficult for businesses to borrow money and invest, which invariably leads to slower economic growth. Not to mention the strain on the private real estate sector as it pertains to mortgage payment stress, which in turn could certainly lead to a wave of defaults. And the irony in all of this is that Russia's inflation rate is officially stated as about 6%, which is barely 1% more than their pre-war inflation levels. Simply put, Russia's officially stated inflation numbers cannot be trusted under economic conditions like these. Then moving across to a couple of quick funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So the first one is not really funny as much as it is interesting. But in this Russian state media TV late night footage, it's all about Russia's echo chamber of BS, where they say that the Russian T-90 is amazing and it's the best in the world, and that in contrast, the Leopard 2 tanks are rubbish and can't compete. And I for one agree with this sentiment that they have chosen to express here. Because this is great, let them believe this. Because every time Russia states how superior their equipment is to NATO equipment, they inadvertently push back the crossing of the Russian red line further and further, failing to realize that in war you never underestimate your enemy. And it's not just Russian TV hosts that have fallen prey to or succumbed to this or these ideologies. Because even Bunker Boy at the top has repeatedly said, after the introduction of almost every major NATO weapon that's been supplied to Ukraine, be it the Leopard tanks, the Patriot air defense systems, and even most recently the ATACMS, stating that Russia is well equipped to neutralize these threats. And in one instance, Putin was even asking for the delivery of Patriot air defense systems. As he said on a Russian interview, he said something like, "Let them bring the Patriot ADs or air defense systems to Ukraine, they are inferior." So as you can see, Russia is wearing such rose-colored glasses as they continue to drink their own Kool-Aid. Fantastic. Then in a final quick funny to round it all off for today, guys, so take a look at this photo near to Avdiivka. Is it a nice patch of flowers or maybe even some beautiful bushes? No, not at all. Instead, it's been reported that the Russian forces are picking up their dragon's teeth cope cone game again, which I almost find hard to believe, because to do this means that they're once again thinking in terms of winter defenses in the region, which is in stark contrast to their offensive operations in Avdiivka, and doing it with these tiny and ineffective Toblerone defenses. And I have spoken at length on this channel already, all about these useless cope cones. Oh, and as for this instance, one small problem though. The Russian lane works were spotted by the AFU and subsequently had a drone drop munition perform its work, which caused the Russian military engineers to run to safety. And given that Ukrainian drone warfare capabilities have increased exponentially in the in the past 12 months. I suspect that there's a good chance that we'll see a lot more of this type of footage leading up to winter than we ever did before last winter. So even the laying of the cope cones might not even stand a chance now. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.